I'm Brian. I work at Career Protocol as a senior instructor. And before that, I spent too many years as a GMAT, LSAT, and GRE instructor and professional. And I have been working with Lakshay here in round one this season. Lakshay, you want to introduce yourself?
Yes. Hi, everyone. Lakshya this side. I am currently working with McKinsey as a senior analyst, and Brian has really helped me get up my GMAT score, and really excited to be interviewing with Columbia now.
Okay, well, so we'll paste these out and then we'll ask a few of the questions and then we'll sort of break out and chat about them a little bit. So, Lakshay, can you walk me through your resume, please?
Sure. So I graduated in 2018. I did my majors in electrical engineering. I was very passionate about renewable energy at the time. But through the course of the internships I did during college, I realized I was more inclined towards the business side of things, which is why I joined a market research firm right out of campus, worked there for about 6 to 8 months, and then moved to McKinsey to take up a data analytics role. Currently, I'm part of the Growth Maps team where we help clients, retail and CPG clients, identify, quantify, and then target new growth opportunities. For example, we did a menu architecture project where we helped a QSR giant decide which products to keep on their menu, how do we price them, what are the kind of promos you run. And on the retail side, how do you negotiate with the different vendors that you work with? How do you position products in your store? So that's kind of been the centerpiece of my work so far. Now, I've been very fortunate, right? At McKinsey, I got the opportunity to really live the make your own McKinsey philosophy. So I started off in the consumer shopper insights team. So, quick 2 to 3 week sprints, got to work across a lot of industries. So, consumer tech, tourism, retail, all of that. Or as I like to say, I worked on everything from newspaper to toilet paper. So that was quite exciting. And then once I got an understanding of what I really like, which in my case is retail and CPG, I got the opportunity to really double down on that, join the growth map teams where the projects are longer so I can drive more impact. And have been loving it. I've been with the firm for about 3.5, 4 years now. And now really excited to be here applying for my MBA.
Okay, great. All right, you react first. Tell me, what do you think?
I think it was a bit long, but I think I covered the career progression all right.
Yeah, it probably wasn't as long as you think.
Hmm.
I didn't time that one. I'll time some of the future ones, but it was certainly like that's probably about right in the sweet spot. Any shorter than that, and you risk cutting out some of the details that sort of make it come alive. And then any longer than that, and sure, you would have been rambling. I thought, a lot of people don't need to go to undergrad or go that far
Hmm.
back. Just saying how you started in engineering, but that you found, an interest in business it was very quick, and it was a good detail to add some spice to what I knew about you. I was, and then you arrived at McKinsey, and then you were currently working at McKinsey. So then you arrived at McKinsey, and then 6 months later you arrived at McKinsey, and then you're currently working on the Growth Maps team. And I
Hmm.
was thinking in my head, I was trying to remember the feedback I wanted to give, right? And so I was kind of thinking like, wait, tell me about your journey at McKinsey. Tell me about not just getting there and what you're doing now, but tell me a little bit about the progression. But then at the end, you circled back around and did just that. So I thought that worked just fine. Where you say like, okay, this is what I'm currently doing, and then this has been my journey. I mean, in any situation, I think that's going to work just fine. You might consider trying to swap those
Hmm.
organizationally. Tell me about your journey, and then end with like a couple of recent highlights, right? Or a couple of things that you've been recently excited about, like
Hmm.
I've been really excited about these two projects, and you gave me a taste of, I love the from newspaper to toilet paper line. That's awesome and funny, and it hits. That's really great. I hope you, yeah, remember that one. And then I guess at the end, um, uh, you sort of did what I'm doing right now, like, and now I need to stop talking. Yeah. And I think that's really natural. I think in an interview setting, a lot of people are going to do that. It's always totally fine. Thinking about where you're going to land. And the landing spot you picked, like, oh, and here I am, and I'm really excited to be applying for an MBA. I like that as a landing because you're just passing the baton to your interviewer, and you're setting your interviewer up to say, well, yeah, why do you want an MBA and why Columbia?
Hmm. Sure. So, why an MBA, right? So, with my MBA, I basically want to make two pivots. One is from analytics to consulting. So, building some general strategy and management skill sets during the 2 years. And second is in terms of the clients that I work with. So far, majority of my work has been with large incumbent players. And now, having done a recent beverage launch from an idea stage to the retail shelves, I'm really interested in working with startups. So in terms of clients, and then also in terms of the nature that I want, nature of work that I do. So and I feel MBA is the right plug for me because I want to understand three things. One is understanding how to solve the unique challenges that the new businesses face. Second is the interplay between startups and VCs. So when to raise funds, what is the right valuation, and also third, the fundamentals of managing and scaling companies. So those are the three things that I am looking at, and I feel Columbia is the best place for me to do that. And primarily because of, I think there are so many reasons why I want to go to Columbia, but they broadly fit into three buckets, right? The curriculum, the real world learning opportunities, and also the community, right? So first on the curriculum, I feel the idea of not having a fixed concentration and having that flexibility to really tailor my MBA experience. So for example, for me, given my background in microeconomics and statistics, the ability to take advanced courses there and then really double down on the resources and electives of the Lang Center for Entrepreneurship, I think is very appealing to me. And so far majority of my experience has been market research, product pricing, and growth strategy, but now building that foundational skill sets of financial modeling, digital marketing, negotiations, and Professor Singh's operations management class will really help me when I work with emerging businesses. And also taking courses such as foundations of innovation and design thinking will help me push my creative thinking to translate ideas into viable products. And then of course taking some leadership courses to really enhance that skill set when I think about managing teams and scaling organizational capabilities. And I feel doing that at Columbia is unique because we have a lot of practitioners that come in, and it's easy for me to kind of get the best of best who are also very active in the startup scene within New York. So I think that is one of the key advantages from a curriculum standpoint. Second, in terms of the real world learning opportunities, right, the theory to practice approach at Columbia, I feel from a startup perspective, right, there's the Columbia Startup Lab where I can work with startups. There are, there's the small business consulting program, and also the ventures that my fellows will be kind of working on. So helping them in designing products and services will enhance my ability to evaluate product market fit, redefine business models, and all of that from an entrepreneur's point of view. And then on the VC front, right, doing in semester VC fellowships with a CPG focused VC firm like Whirl Invest or Springdale Ventures, and then preparing my investment thesis with professors like Angela Lee, who are kind of the pioneers in the space and very seasoned. And then investing in social enterprises with Microlumbia. I think that will give me the right exposure to translate my classroom learnings into hard skills and understand the mechanics of investing and uncover the subtler nuances of the VC space. And again, being in New York, the access I have with more than 10,000 startups just in New York, the unmatched access I get to founders and VCs via speaker series, conferences, programs like Executives in Residence is unmatched. So really excited to be taking this next career leap at Columbia. And finally, on the community front, I think when I was researching business schools, right, I felt, okay, probably all business schools are collaborative, right? But as I was speaking to students and alumni at CBS, I could really see the difference where people generously helped me with not just my MBA application per se, but also gave me helpful career advice, as to how I can think about pre-MBA internships, what are the kind of podcasts I should be following. So, being an international student, traveling all the way from India to the US, having that support group, I feel is very important to me. And of course, the social backdrop of the New York City, the vibrancy for a foodie and a theater buff like me, having the Broadway shows and, Central Park picnics is very exciting. And lastly, I feel there are a certain number of clubs like the public speaking group or the MCA where I see myself leveraging my prior experiences and adding value. So overall, looking at the full picture makes me even more excited about the 2 years of learning and an opportunity that I have in front of me. So really excited to be here and can't wait to get started.
Okay, great. All right. How long do you think that was?
That was very long.
and it was. And where would you trim?
I think maybe the courses and maybe the experiential learning opportunities.
Yeah, I think some of the courses in the curriculum part, I think the curriculum part could probably be, you could cut that by 75% probably, and just get to the heart of the flexibility of the curriculum. And when you talk about like your background in microeconomics, you could take advanced courses there and double down on the others. And then you mentioned like a specific Professor Singh's, course. You may not need that kind of detail for the curriculum class because you're going to have the other details. When you talked about Angela Lee being a pioneer and some of the other opportunities, I think those details actually sort of pertain more to the kind of experience that you're after than just the classroom experience, like in this context. So if I was going to advise you to trim, I would advise trimming that curriculum part and just say, first of all, the curriculum and aim for 25 seconds, 30 seconds on the curriculum description. Just like the flexibility will allow me to prioritize, double down on the stuff I really want to get out of the Lang Center and be efficient with my classroom time. You could just, in this context, you said more. I know this, your audience doesn't know this, but you said more, in specific about the courses and whatnot in your application. So that'll be communicated for your interviewer. Probably, yeah, getting to the juice, because then you said your second thing, you were like resources. And I was like, oh, I thought you were just doing that. Oops. Okay. Yeah. Now you're going to do resources. So on the audience end, those two, they're so similar. I think, that you want to say first the curriculum, just having the flexibility, boom, be done with it. And then, okay, let's talk about real world resources. And then let's talk about the community. Yeah, that would probably get you in the pocket. That was about 5.5 minutes where it was. Yeah. So if you're looking to trim, we always say like, about 3 minutes for some of these questions, but my philosophy, this is kind of 2, right? Why MBA? Why Columbia? So technically I asked you a double question, and so it should be longer in my opinion, because of that structure. And it's like one of the most important. Walk me through your resume is incredibly important to get your interviewer just accommodated to your professionalism and your background. But as a representative of this community, considering whether, they want to support you in your, attempt to join that community, I think if you're going to going long in telling them all the amazing things you're going to do at Columbia is probably the place to do that, So don't get self-conscious about it. I would be more concerned if you gave a 6-minute answer to walk me through your resume than I would be to this double question. I think if you cut the curriculum part to be super brief and just get to the heart of what attracts you about the curriculum with no specifics, and save your specifics for the real world resources or the experiential learning, as you called it, and then a little bit about the community, because that's your personal experience. Also, that's something anybody can come in and talk about the curriculum. And I think the part about I want your audience to still be engaged when you get to your personal experience with the community, when you're like, they were so supportive, and that's really important to me, traveling from overseas, I'm going to need that. I thought those were really great points, and you just want to make sure that your listener is still really with you to hear those parts of it. Your overall presentation and vibe is so good. Like, I know that you've been practicing, but I can tell, and I'm really appreciating that as an interviewer in this mode, I can tell that you are prepared, that you have worked for this and you've thought about it, and you're still making it come to life. You are not a robotic. You're still appearing very, very warm and human, and I don't know if your smiles and things are rehearsed, if those are well timed. I don't know how much of a theater buff you are, but it doesn't matter. It's coming across really well. I think it's really your whole vibe is coming across as prepared, but also sort of warm and spontaneous. So take that for whatever it is. Don't change anything. Do that exactly just like that, except trim that curriculum part. That would be my advice there. Okay, well, let's hop back in, and I want to jump back in right where you just ended, and I want to say what excites you about startups. Why startups?
Yeah, so I recently did a beverage launch where we were working with a global coffee chain, and their in-store, like with the pandemic, people stopped going in-store. So they had to pivot to bottled beverages. And it was an interesting project because, we were essentially working with very limited resources. And also the fact that, beverages as a category is in and of itself very competitive. So I think we did a couple of innovative things. So from the very onset, we followed a very lean approach, incorporating customer feedback in the formulation iterations to really understand what is the mix that we want to land at. So something which is low sugar, which meets the consumer demand at the moment, right? But also in terms of testing out the price, right? How are customers reacting to different price points before actually launching the product at scale? And I think one unique thing that we did at that point was, in order to make sure that we have a certain edge in the space, leveraging their existing data to triangulate customer hotspots so that we can ship the product directly to them from our bottling facility. I think that gave us the unique edge over other traditional retail only players. So, the thrill of taking something from an idea stage to actually seeing it on retail shelves, was very exciting. We did the launch. It was successful. We did it in the next two big coffee markets, UK and Japan. So, when you're creating jobs at the height of a global recession, when people are losing jobs, I think that, and also like taking something this far really inspired me to work with startups. And also like the Indian ecosystem at this time is really buzzing. We have more than 100 unicorns, and we've seen 4x growth in terms of the capital that's flowing in to the country and the startups. So this is where I want to be.
Okay, all right. So tell me, react to your answer there.
I think my pace was a little bit all over the place at the beginning, because I was in my mind thinking, where should I start with? It wasn't a planned question. So
Right.
that was something, but also, I think I did not give the answer, the structure that I had prepared. So I think giving it the structure that, these were the challenges, 2 challenges, 3 challenges. These are the 2, 3 things that we did would have helped. And maybe I should have segued into long-term, short-term goals, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think so. For that question, I thought the early part of your response was more tailored to like, tell me about a time you solved a problem for someone, or tell me about a time. It was more tailored to that sort of behavioral style where you're going to tell one specific story about it. And from the interviewer's perspective, I was just really trying to ask a follow-up question about your motivations that I think were more related to your goals. I think getting to that area probably would have been a more connecting kind of direction to go. I got a bit lost in the specifics of repricing this product, and until you told me, 30 seconds in or 40 seconds in, you were like, I seeing this idea come to become real on the shelves there, and then having this kind of impact amidst the pandemic or challenging circumstances was exciting to you. I think you should, for a question like that, like why startups, it's really getting to your goals. Like, what is it about this that's drawing? And so I think you can just sort of cut straight to, these are, you've had a few opportunities to work with, while your bulk of your experience has been with incumbent players and in large organizations, you've had some opportunities to get a flavor, right? Like this was an example of that, of like ideating and going from idea to this and having that impact, and that's a unique set of challenges that excites you. And then I think getting into, yes, the Indian ecosystem is buzzing, and I like the sort of abbreviated version of that you sort of gave for this context. And it's what you want to be a part of. You said this is where I want to be, but I want to know more about why. Why do you want to be there? What's driving you? What's exciting you about the India's startup ecosystem there? So I think for that question, rather than taking the sort of behavioral, here's a story that relates to it, for that kind of follow-up question, it really is just about like what you're interested in. And what excites you about that, those particular challenges that they have, and how that relates to your excitement about your long-term vision for what you want to do. And then then you have a choice there. You can just give me the sneak preview of that, and kind of and kind of pass the batons back to me. And as the interviewer, give me the chance to say, oh, tell me more about your goals, tell me more about your long-term goals, or tell me more about that long-term vision. Or they're giving you, by saying why startups, when you've just expressed like this is your motivation for getting an MBA is to learn more about how to accelerate them or help them function. They're giving you the leash to just answer the goals question straight away, right? In a way, you could be like, well, I'm just really excited about startups. I love those unique challenges. I love ideating and, going through all the technical stuff that you love doing, the kind of data and information that you have. And you love the impact that startups have on people. This is something that I know about you, right? That you've had the opportunity. And here you could mention the pickle project or the solar startup, and just summarize them, not tell deep stories about them, but say, I've had the opportunity to be involved with some startups, some small scale startups. And, I love entrepreneurs. I love entrepreneurship. I love the impact that it can have on communities. And then that's your perfect segue into your long-term goal of returning to help sort of spread that buzz of innovation that's happening around. I think what you did isn't wrong, and you did it that was very concise. That was just over 2 minutes. I would just say, in a word for that question, more personal, because it's just about you and your motivations. Just like, why does this appeal to you? What do you love about it? You think about, does that resonate with you? Or are you thinking?
Yeah, I mean, at least in my head, I did pass the baton to you and tried to keep that short to see if you want to get to goals. But
Totally.
Yeah, fair feedback.
No, you totally did. And you said this is, I mean, you left it on a cliffhanger, and like, okay, so we've got 100 unicorns, the ecosystem is buzzing, and this is where I want to be. I mean, you did. And then I'm like, well, tell me more about where you want to be, so that you certainly did that. I think it was really just the beginning, diving straight into that specific story without the context of just like, these are the problems that excite me, or this is the impact that I love seeing. I felt like we were just directly into the details of this particular story without context. So maybe it's even just telling me a bit about, this is why you're going to tell me that story up front.
Makes sense. Makes
certainly
sense.
wasn't. Yeah, I mean, and this is all nitpicky. None of this is like catastrophic. Oh my God. It was totally great. So, but now that you have, you've really piqued my interest here. What are your goals, long term and short term?
Yeah. So in the long term, I want to return back to India. So I think one big problem in the startup ecosystem right now is that the tier 2 and 3 cities, the smaller cities, account for 50% of the active startups, yet less than 10% of the VC fund flows to these smaller cities. And I want to help bridge this gap by joining a VC office, an incubator like the Google Startup School, or a government role with the Ministry of Entrepreneurship. So that's the kind of long-term impact I want to have. And I feel for doing that, working in startup consulting, so all these big consulting houses have their startup focused arm, like McKinsey has the fuel practice, BCG has its digital ventures, so on and so forth. So working in a startup consulting for about 3 to 4 years, really getting that hands-on experience of working with startups, that too in the US, where the market, I believe, is more developed. So there are a lot of best practices that can be brought back to the country. So that, I believe, will prepare me for my long-term goals. And I feel the MBA from Columbia is kind of the key for me to unlock that journey. So yes.
Okay. All right. Tell me about this one. Let's react.
I think I could have mentioned a plan B for the short-term goals. And I could have maybe talked a little bit more about what I will do in my short term to kind of learn and kind of prepare myself for the long term. So I think that those are 2 or 3 things in my mind.
Yeah, I don't think it's certainly not required that you give a plan B here because I mean it makes perfect sense. You already have an analyst role at McKinsey and you want to go into consulting to learn something specific. I wouldn't say you need to give a plan B in this context. That was very short. That was 1 minute and 15 seconds or something. So that was definitely your shortest response yet. And I think I do think if you're going to go longer about why consulting and what it is about how you're going to go, from the skill set that you have and what you're going to add to it as a consultant. That's going to prepare you to return to India and play this role. So, I mean, you could talk more about your long-term goal as well, but I think for the thrust of this particular question, sketching out the idea of, okay, you want to play a role as a bridge from, VC fund flow going to these larger cities, and you want to divert it into these smaller cities where there's quite a lot of action and a lot of opportunities are being missed. I think also, so if you're going to express anything more about the long term, I think for you, it's really just about expressing your excitement about how they're more about this buzz, that there's this wave of innovation. There's going to be a zillion people online in India soon that, like the conditions are ripe for, an explosion of innovation. And that's just really exciting to you. And you want to be part of that. And the role that you want to play in that is sort of diverting some of the, the infrastructure to where more of the action is. I think if you're going to say anything more, it's just that sort of aspect of it. And then get into more of, why the short term. It's great that you mentioned there's 2 major consultancies that have these startup arms now. And what is it that you're going to do there before going back that's going to prepare? I mean, and the answer to that. I think just giving your interview more of like, I really want to see a lot of I want to see both sides of your relationship. I want to get a chance to, see some successes and some failures, in the ecosystem and see, how build a network, build a reputation, all these sorts of things that go into what you're going to accomplish there before returning. And so you had like, another minute that you could spend talking about why consulting is the next best step.
Fair.
Do you want to try it again?
Sure.
Let's do a replay. I think I wanted for this mock to just really kind of charge through it and charge through the questions as kind of one by one. But let's do one replay just for fun. So it's hard. It's hard to answer the same question twice in a row. It's really, so I'm setting you up here. This is a really, really challenging thing to do. If I were practicing with a friend or something, if practicing with a family member, I would probably want to do another question first and then return to the goals question for it to be free rather than doing it back to back. So that's me personally. I'm setting you up a bit here. Okay, but let's try it. So speaking of that, tell me a little bit more about your goals, long-term and short-term.
Sure. So in the long term, so as I mentioned, right, the startup ecosystem is really buzzing in India, and with government's Make in India initiative and increasing digitization, I think there's a lot of activity that's bound to happen. Much like any other developing economy, right? The first leg of growth was driven by startups in logistics and e-commerce. But now, as the ecosystem matures, we're bound to see more innovation that happens, and I feel that is where I want to be. I think one big problem that I've identified is the smaller tier 2, tier 3 cities account for more than 50% of the active startups, yet less than 10% of the VC fund flow is currently in that direction. So I want to, in the long term, bridge this gap and help small town entrepreneurs really have that kind of support around them to accelerate growth and innovation within the country by joining a VC firm or an incubator like Google Startup School or a government role with the Ministry of Entrepreneurship. So that's where I want to go in the long term. And I feel a good stepping stone for me is working in startup consulting for 3 to 4 years. So all these big consulting houses like McKinsey has its startup focused arm called Fuel, BCG has it called Digital Ventures. So I feel they're working there for 3 to 4 years will really help me make that transition, right? Working hands-on with founders will help me try and get some operational experience that I don't have currently. Working on executing strategies and closing market gaps will kind of again strengthen what I've learned through experiential learnings in college, but really do that in a proper risk environment, which was risk-free during college, right? So having that real world exposure, that too in a market like US, right, which is much more developed as a startup ecosystem, I feel there are a lot of best practices that I can learn. And there's certainly a lot of activity that's happening in New York within, retail and CPG, the space where I'm interested. So doing that for 3 to 4 years, and then making that transition. And I think one added advantage of returning back to McKinsey and joining the field practice is I'll get to work with investors on conducting due diligence, sizing potential markets, and benchmarking companies, benchmarking startups. So I feel that will kind of give me real exposure to startups, help me network and stay up to date with the latest trends. And yes, I feel Colombia is kind of the missing piece that will help me unlock this journey.
Okay, all right, yeah. So considering that I set you up for a big challenge into having to do the same exact question back to back and repeat, you're so good off the cuff. You're such a good, you're a great improviser, which is awesome that you can sort of trust that instinct. If you go blank and you forget your plan or you forget your outline or your preparation, I trust that your improvisational and ability and just your excitement and you're clearly knowledgeable about like what you're talking about, and you've done your research. So I think you can trust yourself to survive and thrive in a situation where you forgotten your plan or you've gone blank or something. So I think that gave some additional context that was helpful. For the long term, a little bit more detail about what inspires you about returning, and then a little bit more of the nuts and bolts of sort of getting into operations experience, making marketing plans, and the notion of risk you can't substitute that, you can't fake that, and managing those relationships and participating in that risk on environment is a part of it. And you brought out the unique aspects of the US startup ecosystem and how it's a bit more developed right now. So you'll be able to take best practices back, and it was a stronger justification or exploration of that to me. What did you think about that version?
Hmm. I still feel the short-term part could have been more tight, more structured. Uh, but I think from a covering base perspective, I did touch broadly on all the points that I wanted to. So I feel
Yeah.
the story connects. So, but yeah, obviously can do better.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, let's move on. Um, uh, you mentioned the theater club and one other earlier. I can't remember which one. Tell me a bit
Yeah.
about how you're going to get involved at Columbia.
Yes. So I think there are two unique places where I can get involved. One is the theater club. Like, uh, so every MBA student or alumni that I've spoken to, I think one common thing that everybody said is that you won't even realize how quickly the 2 years fly by. And if I look back at my 4 year undergrad, I feel that's certainly true. My fondest memories are either tied up in an old laptop or worse, never captured. So I want to change that this time. So preparing a 1 2 hour skit at the end of the year to capture those moments, and also start a student blogging channel where students can post whatever adventurous thing that they're doing, and that way wherever our MBA takes us, our memories, our fondest memories will always be a click away. So I think that's one aspect of it. And the other aspect is with the Management Consulting Association, right? Having done more than 40 client engagements, and read case in point cover to cover a lot of times, I feel there are a lot of value. There is a lot of value that I can add to the consulting group, answering questions like why consulting, or what does a typical day-to-day look like, to the broader best practices on how to network, how to problem solve, and also kind of getting them acquainted with the consulting lingo. What is 80/20? What is a white space? Boiling the ocean? That kind of thing. So personally, having made that transition from engineering to consulting, I empathize with the career switchers. I know the struggle is real. So by organizing a consulting trek to my current team's home ground, which is Chicago, facilitating connections and also sharing my list of helpful resources, I hope to save my peers some valuable time, take away some of the recruiting stress, and also, while I'm focusing on the startup stuff, so also be in touch with my own consulting prep, right? So yes.
Okay, so just conclude that. So instead of saying so, yes, tell me so. So those are the primary ways I'll get it. Just wrap that up.
Yeah, so that's primarily how I see myself getting involved.
Yeah, there you go. Okay. There's such everyone does, like 100% of people do this, where they have great when they have a great sort of intro, or they get into the question, and then they're like excited and they get to talk about, just like you were. You were so excited and so genuine, and those contributions were so concrete and so real. They were not boilerplate contributions. I really appreciated that about them. You're like, oh wow, these are unique. Okay, preserving the memories and of the cohort, and then really leveraging your own experience to help reduce the recruiting burden, and help help your peers in some way. I think those are really genuine contributions, and the way you were communicating them was very genuine. And then you're like, and now I'm done talking. And yeah, I wish I've told other clients that this week. If I just, I want a montage in my mind where I capture all of the practice questions that were ended with, and yeah. So one thing is, that's fine. What the point I'm getting at is, that's a pervasive, thousands of people are going to end one or more interview questions that way. And yeah, that's the answer to my question. So just paying a little bit of attention to sort of landing the plane there, and a tried and true way to do that is just to, just tell them the question that you just answered, and yeah, or with this one, those are a few specific ways that I've thought of already. I'm sure I'll discover more, right? I'm sure I'll find a way to contribute in other ways. But from where I'm sitting now, 1 year and 3,000 miles away, those are some concrete ways I imagine contributing, right? Okay, great. Let's move on to, I knocked it out of the park, nailed that one. You're going to be a contributor. There's no doubt in my mind. Okay, let's move on to, tell me about a time you faced a challenging situation.
Yeah, so I was working on this project where, in addition to a standard analysis, we wanted to leave the client with an Excel model with which they could refresh the results and visualize them in real time. It was an Alcobev client, and there was a lot of fluctuation during COVID. So the ability to do that was essential for the client's leadership. Now we were facing three key challenges. One, there was no clear roadmap of how we get from point A to point B. Second, in order to achieve this project, we collaborated with two additional teams, and I was supposed to give instructions to senior tenured colleagues. And third, while the client's leadership was aligned with what we're doing, the execution team that we were working with was this was one additional task to the list, and they were finding all sorts of problems with, hey, this is not going to work. This, basically finding problems with what we were doing. And so I sent some animosity, or not animosity, it's a strong word, some apprehension from the team. So I did three things, right? First was to go to YouTube, learn how Power BI works, learn how macros work, so that I have a common language to speak with to the additional teams that we were working with within McKinsey, right? And second was being very transparent with the team, honest about what my capabilities is, breaking down the problem for them, but then really trusting and leaning on them to execute it in the way they see fit. And third, I feel when nothing was working with the execution team, what I did was we gave them a work in progress model, prepared a list of instructions, said them, hey, just identify the pain points for us, play around with the tool, get a sense of what we're doing. And I feel once we stopped building by McKinsey to co-creating that with the client, once they got their hands dirty, they were not only identifying the pain points, but given they were so close to the industry, they were also suggesting ways to make that better. So that really turned things around. And I think three key takeaways for me from that experience, right? The fact that I was able to learn something new which I had no clear understanding in, and also bring other people along with me in that experience was a good takeaway for me. And I think second, just the idea of building something from scratch, right? We don't get to do that every day. So I think that was very exciting for me. And third, this work that we've done is now a standard part of our project delivery. We've since rolled it out to 5 or 6 more clients. I've kind of become the visualization Spock in the team, where if anybody is working on that kind of a project, I'm pulled in. Well, that's extra time from projects, but happy to do that. And yeah, really loved this entire journey of executing this.
Okay. All right. You react first. Tell me about it.
I think
First of all, let me say this. I'll say this first. I hate the question. So tell me about a challenge. To me, I mean, we've seen it. It pops up a number of times in behavioral interviews. Clients get that question, but personally, I think the question is so vague as to be almost meaningless. But anyway, yes, tell me about your judgment of the response.
I think I kind of went a little bit off script towards the learning part. I think that is where I was rambling a little bit, but then I got back, and maybe I wasn't looking at the screen enough. Maybe that's something I should do more of. But other than that, I think I did fine. I'm not sure on time.
Yeah, time was fine. I think you're looking at the screen enough. I don't think you need to pressure yourself to do that. We're always going to look aside when we're thinking, or visualizing, and then you can come home for the smiles and the contact and the summary points, and that kind of makes an impact when you turn to that. I think one thing for this one is, I enjoyed as a listener the inclusion of the learning. maybe just framing that as that, you were like, I think you said like, so I took some action steps. I did 3 things. The first thing I did was head to YouTube. And I was like, wait, what? And I think like, then I understood it, of course, just a few seconds later. But if you said the first thing I did was I had some homework. I needed to learn some things I didn't know. And so a tried and true method is, I went to YouTube, where I've learned many useful things that I've carried with me throughout my career. Sort of just frame that, you get to say like, yeah, I'm a self-learner, and this is a habit of mine. When there's something I don't know, I have to learn more about it so that I can communicate more effectively about it and deliver value that the client is more approachable, right, for the client. The other thing is, so that, and a great takeaway, okay, so you have 3 challenges and 3 takeaways from it. I think, which is all great. I think I'm a big fan of at least one of the takeaways. If there's only one takeaway, it should be related to this. If there's multiple takeaways, one of the takeaways, I think it should relate to how you've changed with your other client relationships moving forward, right? So you learned that you like, building it, your takeaways were sort of like, hey, you can learn this stuff and you can support your team and accelerate their learning by just your nature and what you like to do. You learn that you enjoy building this tool from scratch, which sort of relates to your broader journey about startups and building things and doing that. And then the third takeaway was, I can't remember what it was, but it was basically about being success. Like it was a success and it felt good that it was a success. All fine. If I were gonna, this is all nitpicking and nuanced stuff. If I were gonna add anything to that, I would, I would frame it as having had this experience with the client where they had this apprehension and they were skeptical of the value this tool was going to add. What you've learned is giving them some ownership of the tool, letting them in on the beta stage, and then, taking their feedback into account, or sometimes just parking it with them and letting them play with it. I don't know how you would want to articulate that, but something about how this strategy of getting some buy-in from the client is now like just in your tool belt. This is something you can use in the future when you have clients who are skeptical about a tool, or a team that's resisting adoption in some way. Is you got some buy-in from them by just saying, hey, have a look, like just play with it and then let us know what you want, and I don't know if the takeaway there is about flexibility, or if it's about recruiting, getting ownership from them or getting buy-in from them by giving them some agency in the process. I don't know. How would you articulate that?
Yeah, I think the word that I used this time, but I didn't really know of them back then, was this is a very common theme that is emerging, where rather than the consulting, I was building something on the own, like you kind of co-create solutions with the client, given they have a lot of perspective on how the market looks like, what they actually need, and they can possibly add a lot of value. So I feel, but at that point when I was working on the project, I did not know that. I did that purely from a situational standpoint. But yeah, I could talk a little bit about how this is something that I try and do on further projects.
Yeah, it's not required. You can have a good answer to a question that just like, these are the takeaways and these were the successes. Totally fine. Just in my personal brand, I'm a fan of the, this is now something that I do on every client. Like I know that you have some other stories. You're like, okay, now every time I have a new team for this, we set up these calls, and we adapt in this way. I think because part of the gist of a behavioral question is, how do you take value from experiences and move forward? What have you seen about it that, especially when they're about a trial, trials and tribulations, when they're about a failure, about a setback, about a conflict, then sort of the thrust behind the question is like, are you humble enough to be able to see that, you faced challenges, had conflicts, made failures, encountered setbacks, made mistakes, and then are you sort of that growth mindset that you can take value from it, and even from an adverse experience, and incorporate it into your toolkit moving forward. I think that's always sort of like the question behind the question oftentimes. Even though I don't like that question at all. Okay, let's do another one. Okay, let's do a different flavor. Here's a different flavor of behavioral question that you can see from time to time. Tell me about your 3 primary strengths.
Interesting question. I feel 3 strengths for me certainly. First has to be patience. I feel as an individual, I am very well informed when I'm making decisions. I reach out to a lot of people before really taking those big life decisions, which at times has been more like I'm spending too much time taking a decision, but then also kind of being prepared is very kind of relieving for me, and I think that helps in more ways. So second has to be dedication, right? I think there is no substitute for hard work. For the last 6 months, all I've done is trying to get my GMAT score from 710 to 770, not gone out with friends, and thinking about college applications and reflecting on what I really want to do post MBA. So I think that ability to kind of shut everything else off and then really focus has also helped me at McKinsey, where I received a distinctive rating, top 1% globally. That was difficult, but I'm so proud of it. And I think that the dedication is really a big part of it. And third is, I feel, is the ownership, right? Taking charge of things, getting things done, and really owning up not just to the successes, right, but also to the failures and the mistakes that I've made along the way. I feel there's so much to learn from what I didn't do right, then I did do right. So I think then kind of, and I think that's kind of very true to what we have at McKinsey as culture, right? Taking ownership of things, of what you're doing. And yes, I think those are the 3 main strengths as I see it. But yeah, sorry,
Okay.
I did the I did the same ending.
And yeah, it's I tell you, it's very common. You are not alone. It's a very common habit, and in that way, totally fine. But yeah, it's hard to stop talking. It's about that. That's one of the challenges. Even when you have an outline, when you have an idea of where you want to go, what you want to communicate, it can be difficult to just end the question or end your response. So in that one, I think I asked you for 3 things, so I know the structure going into it. You're giving me 3 things. An effective way to end that one is, I think, you don't need to summarize those 3 again. You always can. It's always, you basically have 2 options. I think your go-to options for ending any question, for escaping an answer, are to summarize the question you just answered, right? And so you could say yes. And so so I think patience, focus, and hardworking. Yeah, those would be the 3 qualities that I would highlight, right? So you can just summarize those and say them back to me if you remember them, right? If you remember the 3 qualities you just narrated, or you can just end where you are, because I know it's a short list. I knew it was 3. You told me it was 3, and then so when you're working on the hardworking one, and you could be like, taking ownership for projects and working hard is something else that's served me really well in my career.
Yeah. Give me 1 second. I need to plug in my laptop, or else my battery will die. But yes, I agree with you. I think in general, across the board, there's some work that I can do, especially when I'm closing answers, rather than saying so yeah or and yeah. But
that's also, so yes, absolutely. I think, if we were working for perfection, right, toward the perfect interview, yes, you would have a more crisp, just punch to the ending of every response. Realistically, you're human and in a dynamic situation, and you won't. And in fact, many interviewers, right, a lot of times with interviewing, they want to see you struggle a little bit, right? The interviewer wants to see you encounter a question that you don't seem super prepared for, right? They want to see you squirm a little bit, right? And so if they succeed in doing that, then you're not going to have that crisp, clean punchline that you wish. And so ending a couple of questions with and it's like in the studio, as a musician, that would be one that you just fade out, like the band never figures out how to end the track. They're just sort of, just fade that one out. I don't know where it ends. It's an absolutely legitimate way to do it, and you should not be self-conscious or or down on yourself or in any way whatsoever when that inevitably happens.
Yeah. One quick question. So for questions like these, where maybe I'm not as prepared or anything, if I want time to think, is it okay to ask for, let's say, 30 seconds, a minute to kind of think about or structure my thoughts before I start answering it? Because in the middle, I'm not sure if you noticed it, but by the second point, I was in the back of my mind thinking what the third one I should be talking about.
Totally. I could see you doing that, and you did it well. I was like, oh, because most people prepare for the I don't want to use the word negative, but the behavioral style questions that involve conflicts and challenges and setbacks and failures and mistakes and difficult team members and difficult situations. But you do occasionally see the ones that just tell me about your strengths, right? Tell me about something positive about yourself. Tell me about your proudest moment on your resume. And so that can come as a like, I've got to reorient and prep for those. So I could tell you were improvising, but it was, you're a great improviser. So it was a wonderful spectacle to behold. To your question, can you ask for time to think about it? Yes. Can you ask for 30 seconds or a minute? No. So that's too long. So what you can do, and that would be just an awkward silence for both of you to sort of sit through, especially in a live situation. It would be less awkward in a Zoom situation, just because of the distance between you and the listener. But in a live interview situation, that would feel like 10 minutes, if 1 minute of silence together. But what you can do is just breathe. I'm a big fan of using the breath to drive space. And you can certainly say, let me think about that for a second. Let me think about that for a second.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess I'd say there were 3 things, right? And so that's plenty of time. That wasn't a minute. That was probably like 10 seconds, maybe 12 seconds, but it was 2 breaths, right? It was a breath. Let me think. I'm not asking, I'm declaring, right? Would you allow me to think? No, I'm just saying, I'm going to think about that. Let me think. Another patient breath, and then I'm ready to go, right? And the breathing thing buys you time and also settles your reactive nervous system in a way, right? So it gives you that opportunity to ground yourself a little bit and buys you that 5 or 6 seconds, which will be plenty for you, both due to the tremendous amount of preparation that you have done and the great stories that you have to tell and your great improvising skills. You're not going to need more than that many seconds to come up with something to say.
Yeah, I think the pause that you took, I could clearly see what you mean by taking a minute, because that small pause also seemed like a lot on the receiving end of things, because I am just meeting you, like for example, in an interview situation, and I don't know how to react. But I think that reminded me of something I learned while case prepping, how you can probably start with something like, oh, that's a great question, and then kind of buy yourself time doing that. So yes, helpful.
Absolutely, that's a great question. Or let me think about that. And then I'm a big fan of you always have your breath. You always have it. And it's it's an ally for you in all of these situations where your nerves, where you're becoming nervous, where you feel your energy rising and you need to settle a bit, or you feel yourself speaking too quickly and you need to slow down. Your breath is your built-in regulator. And if I saw you, as an interviewer, there's a subtle difference. It's not a major difference, but if you said, versus you said, there's something to me, like just seeing that you're breathing. Even, he's breathing, it's a very subtle thing. I don't know how to describe it, but even just seeing that action of you breathing rather than just seeing you standing there holding your breath. There's something more relatable about that to me, as subtly as an interviewer. And in the context of the answer you were just giving, it's evidence of your patience, right? It's evidence of your patience in the moment. That you'd be willing to slow down and take that pause and claim that space to get yourself together. Yeah. So anyway, that's the long answer to your question. Yes, you can ask for some time. No, not a 30 seconds or a minute or anything quantified, but you can take about a couple of breaths worth of space. And I think that would be plenty.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Of course. Well, I think like that's a great spot to end. I think that, of course, there are more behavioral questions we could go through. There's the whole, do you have any questions for me section? But I think we've done quite a bit with the time that we have already spent. And behind the scenes, I know that you're very well prepared for that side of the interview. Any last minute just reflections on the whole experience of doing a mock interview, or what that's like, or what takeaways you have?
Yeah, I think having read a lot of interview reports by this point from different forums, I think certainly the interview hero program that you guys have is super extensive. At one point I felt like, oh, that was probably too much work that I did early on. But at least, going into interviews, and I feel more prepared in terms of taking different types of questions, even if there's a tricky one in there somewhere. But overall, I think, just telling a story. And because a lot of times I initially read about how do you stand out, or things of questions of that nature, right? But I feel when I really share my experience, what I want to do and what I've done so far, and I think you pushed me to the point where you squeezed that out of me during our discovery process. I think that in and of itself makes the story unique, and we've clearly seen that with the interview invites coming in. So feel really happy that I took out that time and went through that entire process, and really looking forward to December when the decisions come in.
Oh my gosh, yeah, really looking forward to that. And I think, you're a great example. You're a great interviewer, and you've been so responsive to coaching, and while making it yours, and making it personal, and keeping your flavor without sort of trying to sound like the perfect MBA candidate robot. You sound like such a relatable, warm, friendly, smart, competent professional, and that's all you can do is make a connection with your interviewer. And make a new friend, right, is sort of the philosophy behind it. And I think you do a great job of that. So I'm excited too. Good luck.
Thank you.